Oh my God, they killed Kenny. If you've heard that phrase even once in your life, you've encountered what might be the most deceptively simple yet profoundly complex animated series ever created. For over 25 years, South Park has masqueraded as a crude cartoon about four foul-mouthed kids. But beneath that construction paper aesthetic lies one of the most sophisticated pieces of social commentary in television history. Welcome to our deep dive into South Park lore. We're going to peel back the layers of this cultural phenomenon and discover why a show that looks like it was made by elementary school students has managed to stay relevant through multiple decades, presidential administrations, and seismic cultural shifts. This isn't just about the jokes or the controversy, though there's plenty of both. This is about understanding how Matt Stone and Trey Parker accidentally created a living, breathing document of American society. When South Park premiered on August 13th, 1997, it looked like nothing else on television. The animation was deliberately crude, made it look like actual construction paper cutouts that a child might create for a school project. The characters spoke in deliberately flat, emotionless voices. Everything about it screamed amateur hour, except for the writing, which was razor-sharp and unforgivingly brilliant from episode 1. Stone and Parker, two film students from the University of Colorado, had stumbled onto something revolutionary without even realizing it. They created a show that could tackle any topic, no matter how controversial, sensitive, or taboo, precisely because it looked so innocent. How do you get angry at a construction paper cartoon? How do you take offense at something that appears to be made by children? This visual dissonance became their greatest weapon, allowing them to smuggle complex social commentary into what appeared to be simple shock humor. But here's where it gets interesting, and why we're here for the next several hours exploring this world. South Park isn't just random chaos. There's an intricate mythology at work here, a carefully constructed universe where seemingly throwaway gags from Season 1 become major plot points in Season 20. Kenny's deaths aren't just running jokes. They're part of a supernatural mythology involving cosmic horror entities and immortality curses. Randy Marsh's evolution from background character to cultural phenomenon reflects America's own journey through various social and political obsessions. The show operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it's bathroom humor and shock value. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find sharp political satire that manages to offend everyone equally. Go deeper still, and you'll discover genuine character development, emotional storytelling, and some of the most prescient social commentary ever put to film. Stone and Parker have created a show that can make you laugh at a fart joke 1 minute and question fundamental aspects of American society the next. What makes South Park truly unique in a landscape of animated comedy is its production schedule. While most animated shows take months or even years to produce episodes, South Park operates on a 6-day cycle. This means they can comment on current events with an immediacy that's unprecedented in animation. When something happens in the real world on Monday, South Park can have an episode about it airing the following Wednesday. This has allowed them to capture cultural moments with a precision that other shows simply can't match. This rapid-fire approach has also led to some of the most controversial moments in television history. When South Park decides to take on a sensitive topic, whether it's religious extremism, celebrity culture, or political movements, they don't have months to second-guess themselves or water down their commentary. They commit fully, consequences be damned. This has led to international incidents, death threats, censorship battles, and lawsuits, but it's also produced some of the most fearless television ever created. Over the course of our journey together, we're going to explore all of this and more. We'll dive into the supernatural elements that most casual viewers miss. The cosmic horror lurking in Kenny's storyline, the recurring supernatural threats that pop up in seemingly unrelated episodes, the way the show has built an entire mythology around the idea that South Park, Colorado, is essentially a nexus for weirdness. We'll examine the character development that's happened over a quarter of a century, watching four boys grow and change while somehow remaining eternally in fourth grade. We'll look at how the adults of South Park represent different aspects of American dysfunction, from Randy's evolution into a social media-obsessed manchild to Mr. Garrison's journey through gender identity and political extremism. We'll explore the real-world controversies that shaped the show, from the Muhammad cartoon crisis that sparked international incidents to the celebrity lawsuits that tested the boundaries of satirical expression. We'll see how South Park predicted social media culture, meme-based communication, and the polarization of American politics years before they became mainstream concerns. Most importantly, we'll understand why South Park matters. This isn't just a crude cartoon. It's a mirror held up to American society, reflecting our fears, obsessions, hypocrisies, and contradictions back at us in the most unflattering way possible. Stone and Parker have created something that functions as both entertainment and anthropological study, a show that future historians will study to understand what America was really like in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. So settle in, because we're about to embark on a journey through one of the most fascinating creative works of our time. Whether you're a longtime fan looking to understand the deeper layers of the show, or someone who's only heard about South Park through controversy and reputation, you're in for a treat. This is the complete guide to understanding why a simple cartoon about 4 kids has become one of the most important cultural artifacts of our era. The rabbit hole goes deep, and we're going all the way down. Picture this. It's 1992, and 2 college students at the University of Colorado are sitting around making what they think is just a silly Christmas card for their friends. They grab some construction paper, cut out crude figures, and create a short film about a snowman coming to life and fighting the baby Jesus. They call it the spirit of Christmas, and it's exactly as bizarre as it sounds. What Matt Stone and Trey Parker didn't realize is that they were creating the foundation for one of the most influential animated series in television history. The story of South Park's origins is almost as unbelievable as the show itself. Stone and Parker weren't trying to revolutionize television or create groundbreaking social commentary. They were just 2 film students with a twisted sense of humor and access to a video camera. Their friendship had formed over a shared love of Monty Python, bizarre comedy, and an almost pathological need to push boundaries just to see what would happen. Growing up in small-town Colorado had given both creators a unique perspective on American life. Parker, from Conifer, and Stone, from Littleton, understood the peculiar blend of conservative values and liberal idealism that characterized much of suburban America. They'd experienced firsthand the kind of cultural contradictions that would later become South Park's bread and butter. Communities that prided themselves on family values while harboring deep-seated prejudices, schools that preached tolerance while practicing conformity, and authority figures who demanded respect while acting like children themselves. The technical innovation behind their early work was born entirely out of necessity and budget constraints. Traditional animation was expensive and time-consuming, requiring teams of skilled artists and months of production time. Stone and Parker had neither the money nor the patience for that approach. Instead, they embraced what would later be called cutout animation, literally cutting figures out of construction paper and moving them frame by frame under a camera. This wasn't just a cost-saving measure. It was accidentally genius. The crude, childlike aesthetic gave their work an immediate authenticity that polished animation couldn't match. When characters moved in South Park, they looked exactly like paper dolls being manipulated by invisible hands. This visual style created an uncanny valley effect that made viewers simultaneously aware they were watching something artificial while becoming emotionally invested in the characters. The spirit of Christmas became an underground phenomenon in ways that seem impossible in today's digital age. This was 1992, before YouTube, before viral videos, before social media. The film spread through VHS copies passed hand to hand like some kind of analog meme. Copies made their way from the University of Colorado campus to Los Angeles, where they caught the attention of entertainment industry executives who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. The breakthrough came when Brian Graydon, then an executive at Fox, commissioned Stone and Parker to create a video Christmas card for him to send to friends. This second Spirit of Christmas short featured the same crude animation style, but refined the concept that would become South Park's foundation. Innocent-looking characters spouting profanity and engaging in shocking behavior, while adults remained oblivious to the chaos around them. What made this early work revolutionary wasn't just the shock value. Plenty of comedy had pushed boundaries before. It was the way Stone and Parker used that shock value as a delivery system for surprisingly sophisticated social commentary. Even in these early shorts, you could see the seeds of what South Park would become, a show that used crude humor to examine the hypocrisies and contradictions of American society. When Comedy Central finally greenlit South Park as a series in 1997, the network executives had no idea what they were getting into. The pilot episode, Cartman Gets an Anal Probe, established the show's willingness to tackle any topic, no matter how taboo. But it also established something more important: the show's unique voice and perspective. The production challenges of those early seasons were immense. Stone and Parker were essentially learning television production on the fly, working with minimal budgets and tight deadlines. The animation process, while innovative, was incredibly labor-intensive. Every movement required individual paper cutouts to be photographed frame by frame. A single episode could require thousands of photographs and weeks of painstaking work. But these constraints actually enhanced the show's charm. The slightly jerky movement of characters, the obvious seams where paper pieces have been cut and taped together, the occasional glimpse of the animator's hand. All of these flaws gave South Park a handmade quality that made it feel authentic and immediate. Viewers could imagine themselves creating something similar, which made the show feel accessible in a way that polished animation never could. The breakthrough moment came when Stone and Parker realized they could use their crude animation style to tackle topics that more sophisticated shows couldn't touch. The childlike aesthetic provided perfect cover for adult themes, allowing them to discuss religion, politics, sexuality, and social issues with a frankness that would have been impossible in any other format. How do you censor a construction paper cartoon? How do you take offense at something that looks like it was made in elementary school art class? This realization transformed South Park from a simple shock comedy into something much more ambitious. Stone and Parker began to understand that they had accidentally created the perfect vehicle for social satire, a show that could say anything because it looked like it couldn't possibly mean anything serious. The early episodes established the show's core mythology and character dynamics, but they also established its fearless approach to controversy. From religious satire to political commentary to celebrity roasting, nothing was off limits. This wasn't just boundary pushing for its own sake. It was a deliberate artistic choice to create a space where uncomfortable truths could be examined through the lens of humor. Looking back, it's remarkable how many elements of the show's future success were present from the very beginning. The rapid production schedule that would later allow for unprecedented topical relevance, the willingness to tackle controversial subjects, the perfect balance of childish humor and sophisticated commentary. All of these defining characteristics were there from day one, waiting to be fully realized over the course of hundreds of episodes. When you really look at Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny, you're not just seeing four cartoon kids. You're seeing a carefully constructed representation of different aspects of childhood, American society, and human nature itself. Matt Stone and Trey Parker didn't accidentally create these characters. They built them as vessels for exploring some of the most complex themes in modern culture, all while making them believable as actual 9-year-olds. Stan Marsh serves as the show's primary protagonist and audience surrogate, but he's far more complex than your typical cartoon hero. On the surface, he's the normal kid, the one who usually voices the moral of the episode and serves as the voice of reason when everyone else has lost their minds. But dig deeper, and Stan represents something much more interesting. The cynical realist in all of us who sees through the bullshit but feels powerless to change anything. Throughout the series, Stan has evolved from simple straight man to a character dealing with genuine depression and disillusionment. His famous "everything is shit" phase wasn't just a throwaway gag. It was a sophisticated exploration of how intelligent, sensitive people cope with an increasingly absurd world. Stan sees the hypocrisy in adult behavior, the meaninglessness of social conventions, and the arbitrary nature of most cultural institutions. But he's still just a kid with no power to change any of it. This creates a constant tension that drives much of the show's emotional core. Kyle Broflovsky represents the moral compass of the group, but he's also the character most likely to overthink everything. As the lone Jewish kid in a predominantly Christian community, Kyle embodies the experience of being an outsider trying to fit in while maintaining his principles. His relationship with his identity is complex. He's proud of his heritage, but also frustrated by how it sets him apart from his friends. Kyle's character development over the years has been fascinating to watch. He's evolved from a kid who always does the right thing to someone who struggles with the complexities of moral decision-making in an immoral world. His speeches at the end of episodes often serve as the show's moral center, but they become increasingly nuanced over time, acknowledging that simple answers rarely exist for complex problems. Eric Cartman is perhaps the most complex character in the South Park universe, and arguably one of the most fascinating antagonists in all of television. On one level, he's a simple representation of childhood ID, the kid who says and does whatever he wants without considering the consequences. But Cartman has evolved into something much darker and more sophisticated, a perfect representation of American narcissism, entitlement, and casual sociopathy. What makes Cartman truly terrifying isn't his obvious evil. It's his ability to rationalize his behavior and manipulate others into going along with his schemes. He's not just a bully. He's a master manipulator who understands people's weaknesses and exploits them with surgical precision. His anti-Semitism, racism, and general bigotry aren't just random character flaws. They represent the worst impulses of American society given voice through a 9-year-old's mouth. The genius of Cartman's character is that he allows the show to explore how hate and prejudice actually function in real life. Most villains in fiction are obviously evil from the start. Cartman is charming, funny, and often sympathetic, which makes his terrible behavior all the more disturbing. He shows us how real-world monsters operate, not as obvious threats, but as charismatic sociopaths who convince us they're actually the victims. Kenny McCormick is the most mysterious of the 4 main characters, and his mystique goes far beyond his famous deaths and resurrections. Kenny represents the invisible poor in American society, the kids whose struggles go unnoticed because poverty makes people uncomfortable. His muffled speech patterns aren't just a running gag. They're a metaphor for how society literally can't hear the voices of the economically disadvantaged. The supernatural elements surrounding Kenny's character, his immortality, his connection to cosmic horror entities, his superhero alter ego Mysterion, all serve to highlight the very real horror of growing up in poverty. Kenny dies repeatedly because kids like Kenny die all the time in real life, whether literally or figuratively. Their deaths go unnoticed because society has trained itself not to see them in the first place. But Kenny's character also represents hope and resilience. Despite everything he endures, death, resurrection, family dysfunction, economic hardship, he remains fundamentally good-hearted and loyal to his friends. His willingness to sacrifice himself for others, both as Kenny and as Mysterion, shows that heroism often comes from the most unlikely places. The dynamic between these 4 characters has evolved dramatically over 25-plus seasons, but the core relationships remain constant. Stan and Kyle's friendship represents the kind of deep, complicated bond that survives everything life throws at it. Their fights feel real because they come from a place of genuine care and investment in each other's well-being. Cartman's relationship with the other 3 is more complex. He's simultaneously their friend and their enemy, depending on the situation. This reflects something true about childhood friendships. How kids can be cruel to each other one minute and playing together the next. But it also reflects something deeper about how society tolerates and even enables toxic behavior when it comes from charismatic sources. What makes these characters truly remarkable is how they've managed to remain essentially themselves while growing and changing over 2.5 decades. They're still recognizably the same kids from 1997, but they've accumulated emotional depth and psychological complexity that most live-action characters never achieve. Stone and Parker have created four of the most fully realized characters in television history, disguised as crude cartoon cutouts. The real genius lies in how these characters allow the show to tackle any topic imaginable. Through Stan's cynicism, Kyle's moralism, Cartman's amorality, and Kenny's resilience, South Park can explore every aspect of the human experience while maintaining the authentic voice of childhood. They're not just cartoon characters. They're windows into different ways of seeing and processing the world around us. Let's talk about one of the most iconic running gags in television history that eventually became something much more profound than anyone could have anticipated. "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," followed by "you bastards," wasn't just a throwaway joke. It was the foundation for one of South Park's most complex mythologies, a supernatural conspiracy that would eventually involve cosmic horror, immortality curses, and the very nature of life and death itself. In the early seasons, Kenny's deaths seemed random and meaningless, which was exactly the point. He'd get crushed by a falling piano, eaten by rats, struck by lightning, or die in increasingly elaborate and absurd ways, only to reappear in the next episode with no explanation or acknowledgement from anyone except Stan and Kyle's ritualistic response. This created a surreal running joke that became South Park's calling card. Everyone knew about Kenny dying, even people who had never watched the show. But Stone and Parker were playing a much longer game than anyone realized. What started as simple shock humor gradually evolved into genuine mythology as the creators began to question their own creation. Why does Kenny keep dying? Why does he always come back? Why don't his parents or teachers seem to notice or care? These questions led to some of the most ambitious storytelling in South Park's history. The first major clue that something supernatural was happening came in the episode Mysterion Rises, when we learned that Kenny was fully aware of his deaths and resurrections. This wasn't just a reset button. Kenny remembered every painful death, every moment of terror, every time he tried to warn his friends about impending danger only to be ignored because nobody else retained memories of his previous deaths. Imagine the psychological horror of being trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth, watching your friends forget your suffering over and over again. The revelation that Kenny is Mysterion, the masked vigilante superhero, added another layer to his character's mythology. As Mysterion, Kenny could finally use his curse as a superpower. His willingness to sacrifice himself for others took on new meaning when you realized he'd been doing it literally his entire life. But even as a superhero, he couldn't escape the fundamental isolation of his condition. He was surrounded by people who cared about him, but couldn't remember his sacrifices. The cosmic horror elements surrounding Kenny's immortality reached their peak in the Cthulhu trilogy, where we learned that Kenny's curse was connected to ancient, incomprehensible forces beyond human understanding. His parents had been members of a cult that worshipped Cthulhu, and Kenny's immortality was the price they paid for their involvement with these cosmic entities. This transformed Kenny from a simple cartoon character into something approaching Lovecraftian horror, a being caught between mortal and immortal existence, aware of cosmic truths that would drive normal people insane. What makes Kenny's mythology so brilliant is how it functions as social commentary disguised as supernatural horror. Kenny represents the invisible poor in American society, people whose suffering and deaths go unnoticed because acknowledging them would force the rest of us to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality and social justice. The fact that only Stan and Kyle remember his deaths reflects how only children, in their innocence, still retain the ability to see and mourn preventable tragedies that adults have learned to ignore. Kenny's family situation reinforces this metaphor. The McCormicks live in grinding poverty, with parents who are often absent, drunk, or simply unable to provide basic necessities. Kenny's deaths often result from the dangerous conditions that poverty creates: unsafe living situations, lack of proper supervision, exposure to violence and substances. When poor kids die in real life, society responds much like South Park responds to Kenny's deaths, with brief acknowledgement followed by collective amnesia. The Immortality Curse also explores themes of trauma and resilience. Kenny's ability to come back from death again and again mirrors how children from disadvantaged backgrounds often develop extraordinary resilience in the face of repeated trauma. They learn to survive situations that would destroy others, but at the cost of carrying psychological burdens that nobody else can see or understand. The supernatural explanation for Kenny's resurrections provided closure for longtime fans while opening up new narrative possibilities. The revelation that his immortality was tied to his parents' cult membership added generational trauma to Kenny's story. He was literally paying for his parents' sins, trapped in a cycle he didn't choose and couldn't escape. This gave weight to every casual death scene from earlier seasons, retroactively transforming throwaway gags into moments of genuine tragedy. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Kenny's mythology is how it explores the nature of heroism itself. Kenny doesn't have traditional superpowers. He can't fly, or shoot lasers, or bend steel. His only power is his willingness to die for others, over and over again, knowing that his sacrifice will be forgotten, but doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. This makes him perhaps the most genuinely heroic character in the entire South Park universe. The evolution of Kenny's character from simple running gag to complex mythological figure represents South Park at its best, taking something that seems simple and crude on the surface and revealing layers of meaning that reward careful attention and long-term investment. Kenny's deaths went from being random jokes to being integral parts of a carefully constructed narrative about poverty, trauma, heroism, and the price of knowledge. Even when the show moved away from killing Kenny in every episode, the mythology remained. His immortality became part of his character's DNA, informing his actions and relationships, even when it wasn't explicitly referenced. Kenny had evolved from a walking punchline into one of television's most complex and tragic characters, all while maintaining the crude visual style and irreverent tone that made South Park famous in the first place. The genius of Kenny's arc is that it works on multiple levels simultaneously. Casual viewers can still enjoy the shock value and absurdity of his deaths, while longtime fans can appreciate the deeper mythology and social commentary. It's a perfect example of how South Park has managed to maintain broad appeal while rewarding dedicated viewers with increasingly sophisticated storytelling. If the children of South Park represent different aspects of human nature and American society, then the adults represent everything that's wrong with both. Over 25-plus seasons, Stone and Parker have created a gallery of grown-ups who are more immature, selfish, and destructive than any of the kids they're supposed to be guiding and protecting. This isn't just comedy. It's a deliberate and devastating critique of how American society has failed its most vulnerable members. Randy Marsh stands as perhaps the perfect embodiment of modern American dysfunction. What started as a simple background character, Stan's geologist father who occasionally appeared to deliver scientific exposition, has evolved into one of television's most accurate and terrifying portraits of middle-aged male narcissism. Randy's journey from mild-mannered scientist to social media-obsessed man-child mirrors America's own descent into cultural insanity. Randy's character development reflects the show's increasing sophistication in its social commentary. In early seasons, he was just another incompetent adult making bad decisions. But as the series progressed, Randy became a perfect representative of how educated, privileged Americans respond to changing cultural norms, not with wisdom or leadership, but with desperate attempts to remain relevant that usually make everything worse. His obsession with being the center of attention, whether through his band Mouse Rat, his marijuana farm, or his various get-rich-quick schemes, reflects a broader cultural problem where adults refuse to grow up and accept responsibility. Randy wants all the benefits of adulthood, money, respect, autonomy, without any of the actual maturity or sacrifice that should come with it. He's essentially a 9-year-old in a 40-something's body, which makes him more childish than any of the actual children in the show. Gerald Broflovsky represents another type of American dysfunction, the self-righteous liberal who believes his good intentions justify any behavior. As a lawyer and Kyle's father, Gerald should theoretically be one of the more responsible adults in South Park. Instead, he's often the source of the town's problems, whether through his legal maneuvering, his internet trolling, or his tendency to turn every situation into a political crusade. Gerald's character exposes the hypocrisy of people who claim to fight for justice while actually feeding their own egos. His internet trolling as Skankant42 wasn't about social justice or political change. It was about feeling powerful and important in a world where he felt increasingly irrelevant. This storyline brilliantly captured how online activism often becomes a form of narcissistic self-expression rather than genuine social engagement. Leanne Cartman presents perhaps the most tragic case study in parental failure. Her inability to set boundaries or discipline Eric has created a monster, but she's also a victim of societal expectations about motherhood and female behavior. Leanne's permissiveness isn't just bad parenting. It reflects how society expects women to be endlessly nurturing and accommodating, even when doing so enables destructive behavior. The evolution of Leanne's character has been fascinating to watch. Early seasons portrayed her simply as an incompetent parent who couldn't control her son. Later episodes revealed her as someone who's aware of Eric's problems, but lacks the tools or support to address them effectively. She's trapped between competing cultural messages about motherhood. Be nurturing, but not smothering. Set boundaries, but don't be mean. Love unconditionally, but don't enable bad behavior. The authority figures in South Park's educational system represent the complete breakdown of institutional competence. Mr. Garrison's journey from closeted teacher to transgender woman to Donald Trump stand-in to whatever he is now reflects the show's view that people in positions of authority are often the least qualified to handle responsibility. His teaching methods consist mainly of sharing his personal problems with 9-year-olds and making them deal with adult situations they're not equipped to handle. Principal Victoria versus PC Principal represents two different approaches to educational leadership, both of which fail spectacularly. Victoria's old-school authoritarianism was ineffective because it ignored the actual needs of students in favor of maintaining order. PC Principal's progressive approach fails because it prioritizes ideological purity over practical solutions. Both characters show how institutional leaders often serve their own psychological needs rather than the people they're supposed to help. The parents of South Park collectively represent how American adults have abdicated their responsibility to provide guidance and stability for the next generation. Instead of modeling mature behavior, they compete with their children for attention and validation. Instead of providing wisdom and perspective, they create chaos and confusion that the kids have to clean up. This role reversal is central to South Park's worldview. In most family-centered entertainment, parents eventually step in to solve problems and restore order. In South Park, the adults are usually the source of the problems, and it's up to the children to find solutions and restore sanity. This reflects Stone and Parker's view that American society has fundamentally inverted the natural order. The people who should be providing leadership and stability are instead creating instability and chaos. The town meetings and community responses to various crises show how collective adult decision-making fails even more spectacularly than individual parenting. When South Park faces a problem, the adults inevitably choose the most extreme, irrational, and counterproductive response possible. They ban things that aren't actually dangerous while ignoring real threats. They overreact to minor issues while completely missing major ones. This pattern reflects the show's critique of how American democracy actually functions in practice. The adults of South Park represent an electorate that makes decisions based on fear, ignorance, and emotional manipulation rather than facts, evidence, or rational consideration of consequences. They're easily swayed by whoever can generate the most outrage or promise the simplest solutions to complex problems. What makes this portrayal so effective is that it's not entirely unfair or exaggerated. Stone and Parker have created adult characters who are recognizably human. They have understandable motivations and relatable flaws. Randy's desire to feel young and relevant is universal. Gerald's need to feel important and effective is completely normal. Leanne's struggle to balance nurturing with discipline reflects real challenges that every parent faces. The horror of South Park's adults isn't that they're monsters, it's that they're us. They represent what happens when people refuse to grow up, accept responsibility, or prioritize anything beyond their immediate emotional needs. They're a warning about what American society becomes when adults abandon their obligation to be better than their worst impulses for the sake of the next generation. Beneath South Park's crude surface lies a rich tapestry of supernatural elements that most viewers barely notice on first viewing, but which create one of the most intricate mythologies in modern television. From Satan's surprisingly relatable relationship problems to the horrifying true nature of the woodland critters, South Park has built an entire supernatural universe that operates parallel to its grounded social satire, often intersecting in ways that enhance both the comedy and the commentary. The supernatural elements in South Park don't exist in isolation. They're carefully woven into the fabric of the show's reality in ways that feel both absurd and somehow logical within the universe Stone and Parker have created. This isn't a show where supernatural events are treated as special or unusual. They're just another part of life in a town where anything can happen and usually does. Satan himself represents one of the most fascinating character studies in the South Park universe. Rather than being portrayed as an ultimate evil, Satan is essentially a middle-aged gay man dealing with relationship issues and self-esteem problems. His on-again, off-again relationship with Saddam Hussein became one of the show's most emotionally complex storylines, exploring themes of abusive relationships, codependency, and the difficulty of breaking free from toxic patterns. The genius of South Park Satan is that he's more relatable than most of the human characters. His struggles with self-worth, his tendency to stay in bad relationships, his desire to be liked and accepted. These are universal human experiences that happen to be embodied in the literal Prince of Darkness. This characterization serves multiple purposes. It humanizes evil while simultaneously showing how everyday human weaknesses can be their own form of damnation. Hell itself, as depicted in South Park, reflects the show's satirical worldview. Rather than being a place of eternal torment, it's essentially a bureaucratic nightmare filled with minor inconveniences and petty frustrations. This vision of hell as mundane rather than horrific reflects the show's broader theme that ordinary life can be its own form of punishment when people refuse to grow or change. The woodland critters represent perhaps the most disturbing supernatural element in South Park's mythology, precisely because they subvert everything we expect from cute forest animals. These adorable creatures, with their innocent voices and childlike enthusiasm, are actually Satan-worshipping psychopaths who engage in orgies, ritual sacrifice, and casual murder. They're the perfect metaphor for how evil can hide behind innocent appearances, and how our assumptions about innocence and purity can blind us to genuine threats. What makes the woodland critters so effective as horror elements is their unwavering commitment to their twisted worldview. They genuinely believe they're doing good while committing atrocities, which reflects real-world situations where people cause tremendous harm while maintaining their moral superiority. They're cute fascists, essentially a warning about how authoritarianism can package itself in appealing forms. The alien visitors who appear throughout South Park's history represent another layer of supernatural activity that most characters simply ignore or rationalize away. These aren't dramatic invasion scenarios. The aliens are more like cosmic tourists who occasionally interact with Earth for reasons that are never fully explained. Their casual presence in the background of many episodes reflects how extraordinary events can become normalized when they happen frequently enough. The aliens also serve as a commentary on how people react to the unexplained. Rather than fundamentally changing their worldview when confronted with evidence of extraterrestrial life, the people of South Park simply incorporate it into their existing belief systems or ignore it entirely. This reflects real-world tendencies to dismiss or rationalize away information that doesn't fit our preconceived notions about how the world works. The Halloween episodes deserve special mention as showcases for South Park's supernatural elements. These episodes allow the show to explore horror tropes while maintaining its satirical edge, creating stories that are simultaneously scary and funny. The Halloween specials often feature the boys in genuine peril, facing supernatural threats that feel real within the context of the episodes, even while maintaining the show's irreverent tone. Ghost and spirit encounters throughout the series follow a similar pattern. They're treated as unusual but not impossible, part of the broader weirdness that defines South Park as a location. Chef's parents' encounters with the Loch Ness Monster, various haunted locations, and supernatural artifacts all contribute to a sense that South Park exists in a reality where the paranormal is always just beneath the surface. The religious supernatural elements, angels, demons, divine interventions, are handled with the same irreverent approach as everything else in South Park. Rather than treating religious concepts with automatic reverence or rejection, the show examines them through the lens of human behavior and social dynamics. Religious figures are portrayed as having their own agendas and personality flaws, making them more interesting and complex than traditional depictions. What ties all these supernatural elements together is South Park's consistent worldview that the extraordinary becomes ordinary when people are too absorbed in their own problems to pay attention. The supernatural exists alongside the mundane because the characters are usually too self-involved to be properly amazed or terrified by what they're experiencing. This approach serves the show's satirical purposes perfectly. By treating supernatural events as routine, South Park can focus on how people react to extraordinary circumstances rather than getting caught up in the mechanics of the supernatural itself. The real horror isn't that Satan exists, it's that he has terrible taste in boyfriends. The real comedy isn't that aliens visit Earth, it's that humans are too distracted by petty concerns to notice. The supernatural elements also provide metaphorical frameworks for exploring real-world issues. Kenny's immortality curse reflects the cycle of poverty and violence. The woodland critters' cheerful evil mirrors how harmful ideologies can package themselves as positive movements. Satan's relationship problems explore themes of abuse and codependency that many viewers will recognize from their own lives. Perhaps most importantly, the supernatural elements in South Park never overwhelm the human elements. They exist to enhance and illuminate the show's examination of human nature, not to replace it. The supernatural is always in service of the satirical, creating a unique blend that allows South Park to tackle any topic from any angle while maintaining its distinctive voice and perspective. Religion in South Park isn't just a target for jokes. It's a complex landscape where genuine spiritual seeking intersects with human hypocrisy, institutional corruption, and the eternal struggle between faith and reason. Over more than 25 years, Stone and Parker have created one of the most comprehensive examinations of religious belief in American popular culture, managing to be simultaneously irreverent and surprisingly respectful of genuine spiritual yearning. The show's approach to religious satire operates on multiple levels. On the surface, there's plenty of shock humor and boundary pushing that has generated controversy and outrage from various religious groups. But beneath that surface lies a more sophisticated examination of how religious belief functions in modern society, how it can be both a source of comfort and a tool of oppression, and how spiritual institutions often fail to live up to their own stated ideals. The Mormon episode, All About Mormons, exemplifies South Park's complex relationship with religious themes. While the episode certainly mocks specific Mormon beliefs and practices, it ultimately comes down on the side of religious tolerance and family values. The Mormon family is portrayed as genuinely happy, kind, and functional, a stark contrast to the dysfunction that characterizes most South Park families. The episode's message isn't that Mormon beliefs are true or false, but that people who live according to positive values tend to be happier than those who don't. This nuanced approach extends to the show's treatment of other religious traditions. The Scientology episode, Trapped in the Closet, is often remembered for its aggressive satire and the controversy it generated, but also raises serious questions about the difference between religious belief and exploitative cult behavior. The episode doesn't attack the concept of spiritual seeking. It attacks the institutional structures that exploit that seeking for financial gain. Kyle's Jewish identity serves as a consistent thread throughout the series, allowing the show to explore themes of religious minority status, cultural identity, and intergenerational transmission of values. Kyle's relationship with his Judaism is complex. He's proud of his heritage, but sometimes frustrated by how it sets him apart from his friends. His struggles reflect the broader American experience of maintaining cultural and religious identity in a pluralistic society. The Christmas specials deserve particular attention for how they handle Christian themes and mythology. Rather than simply mocking Christian beliefs, these episodes often explore the tension between the spiritual message of Christianity and its commercialization and politicization. A Very Crappy Christmas examines how the meaning of religious holidays can be lost in consumer culture, while Christmas in Canada uses the holiday as a backdrop for exploring family loyalty and sacrifice. Jesus himself appears as a recurring character in South Park, but not as an object of ridicule. Instead, he's portrayed as a genuinely good person trying to do the right thing in a world that often doesn't appreciate or understand his message. His talk show, his attempts to help people, and his generally positive attitude make him one of the most consistently moral characters in the entire series. This characterization allows the show to distinguish between spiritual teachings and the institutions that claim to represent them. The show's treatment of religious extremism and fundamentalism is particularly sharp. Episodes dealing with religious fanaticism consistently show how extreme religious beliefs can be used to justify hatred, violence, and oppression. But the show is careful to distinguish between genuine religious feeling and the cynical manipulation of that feeling by people seeking power or control. The Super Best Friends episode, featuring various religious figures working together as superheroes, reflects South Park's essentially ecumenical worldview. Rather than privileging one religious tradition over others, the show suggests that most religious traditions contain valuable insights, and that religious conflict often stems from human pride and political manipulation rather than genuine spiritual differences. South Park's approach to prayer, divine intervention, and miraculous events is similarly complex. When characters pray or seek divine guidance, their requests are usually selfish or misguided, but the show doesn't necessarily mock the impulse to seek help from a higher power. Instead, it examines how people's understanding of divine will is often shaped by their own desires and prejudices. The evolution of religious themes throughout the series reflects broader changes in American religious culture. Early episodes focused more on traditional denominational differences and church-state separation issues. Later episodes have dealt with religious terrorism, the rise of evangelical political influence, and the increasing polarization of American religious discourse. One of the most sophisticated aspects of South Park's religious commentary is its exploration of how religious belief intersects with other aspects of identity and social belonging. Characters don't exist in religious vacuums. Their faith or lack thereof is influenced by their family background, economic status, education level, and social environment. This creates a more realistic and nuanced portrait of how religion actually functions in people's lives. The show also examines the psychological functions of religious belief. Characters often turn to religion during times of crisis or uncertainty, seeking comfort, meaning, or guidance. The show doesn't mock this impulse, but it does examine how religious leaders and institutions sometimes exploit vulnerability for their own purposes. Perhaps most importantly, South Park's religious satire rarely attacks the core spiritual impulse, the human desire to find meaning, purpose, and connection to something larger than oneself. Instead, it consistently targets the human tendency to use religious belief to justify selfishness, cruelty, or close-mindedness. The show's ultimate message seems to be that spiritual seeking is natural and healthy, but that religious institutions and ideologies should be subject to the same critical examination as any other human creation. This approach has allowed South Park to maintain its satirical edge while avoiding the simple anti-religious stance that characterizes much contemporary comedy. By distinguishing between spiritual seeking and institutional religion, between genuine faith and cynical manipulation, between religious tradition and religious extremism, Stone and Parker have created a body of work that challenges viewers to think more deeply about the role of religion in modern society while still delivering the irreverent humor that defines the show's identity. When South Park decides to take on celebrities, current events, or controversial figures, they don't just dip their toes in the water. They dive headfirst into the deep end, often creating international incidents, sparking legal battles, and generating headlines that sometimes overshadow the episodes themselves. This fearless approach to topical satire has made South Park one of the most influential and controversial shows in television history. But it's also revealed fundamental truths about celebrity culture, media manipulation, and the limits of free expression in democratic societies. The show's approach to celebrity satire operates on a unique principle. No one is too famous, too powerful, or too sacred to be mocked. This equal opportunity offensiveness has led to some of the most memorable episodes in South Park history, but it's also created genuine real-world consequences that extend far beyond entertainment. When South Park takes aim at a celebrity, they're not just making jokes. They're conducting experiments in how far satirical commentary can push before it crosses the line into something more serious. The Tom Cruise and Scientology episodes represent perhaps the most high-profile example of South Park's willingness to take on powerful figures regardless of the potential consequences. Trapped in a Closet didn't just mock Cruise's alleged sexuality. It systematically dismantled the belief system and practices of an organization with significant financial resources and a reputation for aggressive litigation. The episode's detailed explanation of Scientology doctrine, complete with disclaimers that this is what Scientologists actually believe, was devastating precisely because it was presented without editorial comment. The aftermath of the Scientology episodes demonstrated both the power and the limitations of satirical commentary. While Comedy Central initially stood behind the episodes, the network later pulled them from rotation amid reports of harassment and intimidation. Isaac Hayes, who voiced Chef, left the show citing religious objections, though Stone and Parker suggested that Scientology pressure played a role in his departure. The controversy revealed how celebrity satirical commentary can escalate into genuine conflicts with real-world consequences. The Muhammad cartoon controversy represents an even more complex intersection of satirical expression and international politics. When South Park attempted to show the Prophet Muhammad in episodes dealing with free speech and religious sensitivity, they triggered death threats, international diplomatic incidents, and censorship battles that went to the highest levels of media companies. The fact that Comedy Central ultimately censored the episodes while allowing countless other religious figures to be mocked raised profound questions about the practical limits of free expression in a globalized world. What makes these controversies particularly fascinating is how they reflect broader cultural tensions about the role of comedy in democratic discourse. South Park's rapid production schedule allows them to comment on current events with an immediacy that other forms of media can't match. But this same speed means they're often making editorial decisions about highly sensitive topics without the luxury of extended reflection or consultation. The show's treatment of political figures across multiple presidential administrations demonstrates their commitment to bipartisan offense. Whether dealing with Bill Clinton's scandals, George W. Bush's foreign policy, Barack Obama's celebrity status, or Donald Trump's Twitter presence, South Park has consistently portrayed political leaders as fundamentally flawed human beings rather than idealized figures worthy of automatic respect. This approach has created enemies across the political spectrum, which Stone and Parker seem to consider a badge of honor. Celebrity responses to South Park episodes have ranged from good-humored acceptance to legal threats to complete public meltdowns. Some celebrities have embraced their South Park portrayals, understanding that being mocked by the show is a form of cultural validation. Others have responded with lawsuits, angry statements, or attempts to get the show canceled. These varied responses often reveal more about the celebrities' personalities and insecurities than the original satire itself. The international impact of South Park's satirical commentary extends far beyond American entertainment. Episodes dealing with global conflicts, foreign leaders, and international issues have sparked diplomatic incidents and cultural debates in countries around the world. The show's portrayal of Canadian culture, for instance, has become a running diplomatic joke between the United States and Canada, while episodes dealing with Middle Eastern politics have generated serious international controversy. The legal battles surrounding South Park have established important precedents for satirical expression in American media. While the show has faced numerous lawsuits and legal threats over the years, most have been unsuccessful, reinforcing the principle that satirical commentary enjoys broad protection under the First Amendment. However, the practical reality is that even unsuccessful lawsuits can be expensive and time-consuming, creating a chilling effect on smaller media outlets that don't have the resources to defend themselves. The psychological impact on targets of South Park satire is something that's rarely discussed but worth considering. Being portrayed as a ridiculous figure in one of television's most popular animated series can have genuine effects on public perception and personal reputation. Some celebrities have reported that South Park episodes about them have affected their relationships, business opportunities, and mental health. This raises ethical questions about the responsibility that comes with satirical power. The evolution of celebrity culture during South Park's run has also changed the nature of their satirical commentary. In the late 1990s, celebrity scandals were primarily filtered through traditional media outlets. Today, with social media and 24-hour news cycles, the line between celebrities and ordinary people has blurred, and the speed of cultural discourse has accelerated beyond what even South Park's rapid production schedule can match. Perhaps most importantly, South Park's celebrity satire has revealed how the entertainment industry and political establishment actually function behind their public facades. By refusing to respect the unspoken rules about who can be mocked and how far jokes can go, Stone and Parker have exposed the informal power structures that govern public discourse. Their willingness to face real consequences for their satirical choices has preserved a space for genuine irreverence in an increasingly cautious media landscape. The lasting impact of South Park's approach to celebrity and political satire extends beyond individual episodes or controversies. They've demonstrated that satirical comedy can be a form of investigative journalism, revealing truths about powerful figures that traditional media outlets might be reluctant to explore. In doing so, they've also accepted the responsibility and risks that come with that power, creating a model for fearless satirical commentary that continues to influence comedy and political discourse today. Hidden within one of South Park's most seemingly simple episodes lies an economic theory that has become a genuine business school teaching tool and internet meme that perfectly captures the absurdity of modern corporate culture. Gnomes, which aired in 1998, introduced the world to the Underpants Gnomes and their hilariously flawed business plan that has since become shorthand for poorly thought-out business strategies and the magical thinking that characterizes much of entrepreneurial culture. The Underpants Gnomes business plan is elegantly simple in its stupidity. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, Phase 3, profit. This three-step plan, with its mysterious and undefined middle phase, has become one of the most referenced concepts from South Park outside of the show itself. Business schools use it to teach students about the importance of understanding the connection between activities and outcomes. Internet forums invoke it to mock everything from startup pitches to government policies. The beauty of the concept lies in how it perfectly captures a very real phenomenon in business and politics: the tendency to focus on desired outcomes while completely ignoring the mechanisms needed to achieve them. What makes the Underpants Gnomes episode particularly brilliant is how it works on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it's a simple parody of corporate jargon and business planning. The gnomes speak in the kind of meaningless corporate speak that dominates business presentations, using phrases like leverage our core competencies and synergistic solutions, while having absolutely no idea what they're actually doing. This satirizes the very real tendency in business culture to use impressive-sounding language to mask the absence of actual strategy or understanding. But the episode goes deeper than simple corporate satire. The underpants gnomes represent a fundamental flaw in how many people approach problem solving. The assumption that if you can clearly articulate a desired outcome, you've somehow solved the problem of how to achieve it. This magical thinking pervades everything from personal goal setting to national policy debates, where people confidently announce what they want to accomplish while remaining completely vague about the practical steps required to get there. The economic implications of the underpants gnomes theory extend into multiple areas of business and policy analysis. In the startup world, it's become a way to describe business plans that assume success without explaining how that success will be achieved. We'll build a platform, get users, and somehow make money is essentially the underpants gnomes model applied to digital entrepreneurship. The proliferation of this thinking during various tech bubbles has made the South Park reference increasingly relevant to serious economic discussions. The concept also applies to government policy debates, where politicians frequently propose solutions that skip over the crucial implementation details. We'll reduce crime by being tough on criminals, or we'll improve education by raising standards, are examples of real-world underpants gnomes thinking. They identify a problem and a desired outcome while completely ignoring the complex mechanisms needed to connect the two. South Park's broader critique of economic systems extends far beyond the underpants gnomes episode, but that particular concept has become a lens through which to examine other aspects of the show's economic commentary. The gentrification storylines, particularly the Sodasupa development arc, show how economic development often follows the underpants gnomes model. Developers and city planners assume that building expensive new amenities will automatically create prosperity for existing communities, without considering how the actual residents will benefit from or afford these improvements. The show's treatment of corporate culture consistently reveals how business practices often prioritize the appearance of competence over actual results. Companies spend enormous resources on consultants, strategic planning sessions, and reorganizations that follow the underpants gnomes model. They identify problems and desired outcomes while completely failing to understand the practical steps needed to improve their actual performance. Randy Marsh's various business ventures throughout the series often exemplify this kind of thinking. Whether he's trying to become a celebrity chef, start a marijuana business, or launch a music career, Randy consistently demonstrates the underpants gnomes approach to entrepreneurship. He sees successful people in various fields and assumes he can achieve similar success simply by copying their most visible activities, without understanding the skills, timing, or circumstances that actually created their success. The psychological appeal of underpants gnomes thinking lies in how it allows people to feel productive and strategic while avoiding the hard work of actually understanding complex problems. It's much easier to create a PowerPoint presentation about desired outcomes than it is to develop genuine expertise in the mechanisms needed to achieve those outcomes. This explains why the concept has resonated so strongly in academic and professional contexts. It describes a very common form of intellectual laziness that most people recognize from their own experience. The international applicability of the underpants gnomes concept has made it a useful tool for analyzing everything from international development programs to military strategy. Foreign aid programs often follow this model, assuming that providing resources or infrastructure will automatically lead to economic development without carefully considering the institutional and cultural factors that actually drive prosperity. Military interventions frequently demonstrate similar thinking, assuming that removing problematic leaders will automatically lead to stable democratic governance. The educational value of the underpants gnomes concept lies in how it forces people to examine the assumptions underlying their own planning and decision-making. When someone proposes a solution that follows the underpants gnomes model, asking, "What's phase 2?" becomes a powerful way to expose the gap between intentions and implementation. This has made the concept a valuable tool for consultants, managers, and educators who need to help people think more rigorously about cause and effect relationships. The lasting cultural impact of the underpants gnomes extends beyond its utility as an analytical tool. It's become a form of shorthand for identifying and critiquing poor reasoning in public discourse. The fact that a throwaway joke from a crude animated series has become a legitimate part of business and policy vocabulary demonstrates South Park's unique ability to create satirical concepts that reveal genuine truths about how society functions. The Underpants Gnomes didn't just make people laugh. They gave us a new way to recognize and articulate a common form of human foolishness that might otherwise go unexamined. South Park Elementary serves as far more than just a backdrop for childhood adventures. It's a carefully constructed laboratory for social experimentation where Stone and Parker conduct their most pointed critiques of American educational systems, administrative incompetence, and the broader failure of institutional authority. Through the lens of a small-town elementary school, the show has dissected everything from standardized testing to school safety measures, revealing how educational institutions often serve the needs of adults rather than the children they're supposed to protect and nurture. The school functions as a microcosm of American society, where every social trend, political movement, and cultural panic eventually filters down to affect the daily lives of 9-year-olds who just want to learn and play with their friends. What makes South Park Elementary particularly effective as a satirical setting is how it reveals the disconnect between educational theory and practical reality, between stated institutional goals and actual outcomes, between what adults claim to be doing for children and what they're actually accomplishing. Mr. Garrison's evolution as an educator represents one of the most sustained character development arcs in the entire series, serving as a perfect vehicle for examining how personal psychological issues can completely undermine professional competence. From his early days as a closeted teacher using his classroom as therapy for his own sexual confusion, through his gender transition and political radicalization, to his eventual transformation into a Trump-like figure, Garrison embodies how individual dysfunction can cascade through institutional structures to affect countless innocent people. The genius of Garrison's character lies in how his personal journey intersects with broader social and political movements. His teaching methods have always been questionable. He's more interested in working through his own psychological issues than actually educating students. But the specific nature of his dysfunction has evolved to reflect changing cultural anxieties. In early seasons, his repressed sexuality created classroom environments where students were exposed to adult psychological problems they couldn't understand. Later, his political extremism turned the classroom into a platform for ideological indoctrination. What remains constant throughout Garrison's various transformations is his fundamental selfishness and incompetence as an educator. Regardless of his gender identity or political affiliation, he consistently prioritizes his own emotional needs over his students' educational development. This creates a powerful commentary on how institutional positions can be occupied by people who are fundamentally unsuited for the responsibilities they hold. The transition from Principal Victoria to PC Principal represents South Park's examination of how educational leadership philosophies have evolved over the past several decades. Principal Victoria embodied old-school educational authority. She was stern, traditional, and focused on maintaining order and discipline. Her approach was often ineffective and sometimes counterproductive, but it came from a genuine desire to create a stable learning environment for students. PC Principal represents the newer approach to educational leadership that prioritizes ideological conformity and political correctness over practical educational outcomes. His methods are more physically intimidating and psychologically manipulative than Victoria's ever were, but they're wrapped in progressive language about inclusivity and social justice. This character allows the show to explore how educational institutions can become tools for political indoctrination regardless of which political philosophy is driving the agenda. The contrast between these two leadership styles reveals South Park's central critique of educational authority. Both approaches fail because they prioritize adult concerns over children's actual needs. Victoria's traditional authoritarianism created environments where students were expected to conform to arbitrary rules without understanding their purpose. PC Principles' progressive authoritarianism creates environments where students are expected to conform to complex ideological frameworks that they're developmentally incapable of fully comprehending. Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, represents another aspect of educational dysfunction: the tendency for schools to medicalize normal childhood behavior rather than addressing underlying environmental or institutional problems. His catchphrase, "drugs are bad, K," has become shorthand for the kind of simplistic, ineffective messaging that characterizes much of contemporary drug education. But Mackey's failures extend beyond drug counseling to encompass his general approach to mental health and behavioral issues. Mackey's character reveals how schools often treat symptoms rather than causes when dealing with student problems. Instead of examining whether institutional policies or practices might be contributing to behavioral issues, he immediately turns to pharmaceutical solutions or simplistic behavioral modification techniques. His own drug use and psychological instability further undermine his effectiveness, creating situations where the person responsible for students' mental health is often less psychologically stable than the children he's supposed to be helping. The various educational fads and policy initiatives that sweep through South Park Elementary serve as perfect vehicles for satirizing how American education is constantly being reformed by people who have never spent significant time in actual classrooms. Whether it's standardized testing, technology integration, or social-emotional learning programs, these initiatives are typically imposed from above by administrators and policymakers who are more concerned with appearing innovative than with understanding how their changes will actually affect teaching and learning. The show's treatment of special education and inclusion policies reveals the complexity of trying to serve students with diverse needs within a single institutional framework. Episodes dealing with disabilities often show how well-intentioned policies can create unintended consequences when they're implemented by people who don't understand the practical realities of classroom management and individual student needs. School safety measures provide another rich source of satirical material, as South Park Elementary becomes a testing ground for increasingly absurd security protocols that prioritize the appearance of safety over actual protection. The show's treatment of school shooting drills, security cameras, and other safety measures reveals how institutional responses to genuine threats often create new problems while failing to address the underlying causes of violence and instability. The relationship between parents and school administration creates additional layers of dysfunction, as competing adult agendas clash over policies and practices that directly affect children's daily experiences. Parent-teacher conferences, school board meetings, and other formal interactions between families and institutions become battlegrounds where adult psychological needs and political beliefs take precedence over educational considerations. What emerges from all of these institutional critiques is a picture of an educational system that has lost sight of its primary mission. South Park Elementary, like many real schools, has become a place where adult dysfunction plays out at the expense of children's educational and emotional development. The students learn to navigate around institutional incompetence rather than being supported by effective teaching and leadership. The most tragic aspect of South Park's educational satire is how often the children demonstrate more maturity, wisdom, and problem-solving ability than the adults who are supposed to be guiding them. This role reversal serves as a damning indictment of how American society has structured its educational institutions and the kind of people it has placed in positions of authority over its most vulnerable members. Over the course of South Park's quarter-century run, the show has evolved from crude shock humor to sophisticated social commentary. And nowhere is this evolution more apparent than in its treatment of gender, sexuality, and identity issues. What began as simple stereotypes and offensive jokes has gradually developed into one of television's most complex and nuanced explorations of how identity politics intersect with human dignity, personal growth, and social acceptance. The transformation of Mr. Garrison represents perhaps the most ambitious character development arc in South Park history. serving as a vehicle for exploring not just gender identity issues, but the broader question of how personal identity relates to social acceptance and individual happiness. Garrison's journey from repressed gay man to transgender woman to whatever he is now reflects the show's evolving understanding of these issues, but also its consistent skepticism about whether changing external characteristics can solve deeper psychological problems. Garrison's initial gender transition was handled with surprising sensitivity for a show known for boundary-pushing humor. Rather than simply mocking transgender people, the episodes explored the genuine psychological complexity of gender dysphoria while also examining how society responds to people who challenge conventional gender categories. The show's treatment of Garrison's transition revealed both the genuine emotional relief that can come from living authentically and the practical challenges that transgender people face in a society that isn't always accepting of gender nonconformity. However, Garrison's eventual detransition and his various romantic and political adventures since then suggest that the show views gender identity as just one aspect of a much more complex psychological landscape. His continued dysfunction and selfishness regardless of his gender presentation implies that changing external characteristics doesn't automatically solve underlying personality problems or create genuine happiness and fulfillment. Big Gay Al represents an entirely different approach to LGBTQ+ representation, one that emphasizes dignity, self-acceptance, and community building rather than shock value or political activism. From his first appearance as the scout leader who created a sanctuary for gay animals, Al has consistently embodied positive values like tolerance, kindness, and genuine care for others. His relationship with Mr. Slave and his various appearances throughout the series have shown LGBTQ+ characters as complex human beings with their own agency and dignity. What makes Big Gay Al particularly effective as a character is how he models healthy responses to discrimination and prejudice. Rather than becoming bitter or defensive when faced with homophobia, he maintains his essential goodness while standing up for himself and others. His approach to activism focuses on education and relationship building rather than confrontation or demands for special treatment. The development of Tweek and Craig's relationship represents South Park's most recent and sophisticated approach to LGBTQ+ themes. What began as a joke about fans shipping characters evolved into a genuine exploration of how young people navigate questions about sexuality and identity. The show's handling of their relationship has been remarkably mature, showing two characters discovering their feelings for each other while dealing with family expectations, social pressure, and their own confusion about what their relationship means. The Tweek and Craig storyline also reveals how South Park has learned to balance humor with respect when dealing with identity issues. The comedy comes from the characters' awkwardness and the adults' overreactions, not from mocking the idea of same-sex relationships themselves. This represents a significant evolution from earlier seasons where LGBTQ+ characters were often primarily sources of shock humor rather than fully developed individuals. The show's treatment of gender identity extends beyond specific LGBTQ+ characters to encompass broader questions about how society constructs and enforces gender roles. Episodes dealing with boys playing with dolls, girls participating in traditionally male activities, and various challenges to conventional gender expectations reveal the arbitrary nature of many social conventions while also acknowledging the real social pressure that people face when they don't conform to expected norms. South Park's approach to progressive themes more broadly reflects the show's libertarian skepticism about both traditional authority and progressive activism. The show consistently advocates for individual dignity and personal freedom while remaining suspicious of organized movements that claim to speak for marginalized groups. This creates a complex political stance that often frustrates viewers on both ends of the political spectrum. The PC Principle era represents the show's most sustained examination of how progressive politics can become authoritarian when taken to extremes. PC Principle himself embodies the contradiction between progressive ideals and authoritarian methods. He genuinely wants to create a more inclusive environment, But his approach involves intimidation, surveillance, and punishment for people who don't demonstrate sufficient ideological conformity. This storyline allows South Park to distinguish between genuine tolerance and what it sees as performative progressivism. Characters who demonstrate actual kindness and acceptance, like Big Gay Al, are portrayed positively regardless of their political views. Characters who use progressive language to gain power or social status, like PC Principal, are criticized for their hypocrisy and self-interest. The show's treatment of feminist themes follows a similar pattern, supporting women's dignity and equality while critiquing certain forms of feminist activism. Strong female characters like Wendy consistently advocate for women's rights and challenge sexist behavior, but they do so through individual action and personal integrity rather than through organized political movements. The evolution of female characters throughout the series reflects changing social attitudes about women's roles and capabilities. Early seasons often relegated female characters to supporting roles or simple stereotypes, but later episodes have given characters like Wendy, the Goth Girls, and various adult women much more complex and interesting storylines that explore the full range of human experience rather than just gender-specific issues. Perhaps most importantly, South Park's approach to gender and identity issues reflects its broader humanistic worldview. The show's ultimate message seems to be that people deserve dignity and respect regardless of their identity categories, but that identity itself shouldn't become the primary basis for how we understand ourselves or relate to others. Characters are judged by their actions and character rather than their demographic characteristics, which creates space for both social progress and individual complexity. This approach allows South Park to advocate for tolerance and acceptance while maintaining its satirical edge and its skepticism about institutional solutions to social problems. The show suggests that genuine progress comes from individuals choosing to treat each other with kindness and respect, rather than from political movements or policy changes imposed from above. Hidden within what initially appeared to be simple superhero parody episodes lies one of South Park's most ambitious and sophisticated storylines, a trilogy that evolved into an ongoing universe exploring themes of childhood trauma, identity formation, and the psychological appeal of vigilante justice. The Coon and Friends saga represents Stone and Parker at their most narratively complex, creating a superhero mythology that simultaneously parodies the genre while using its conventions to examine deeper questions about power, responsibility, and the human need for meaning and purpose. The Coon trilogy begins as what seems like a straightforward superhero parody, with various South Park kids adopting costumed identities to fight crime in their neighborhood. But as the story develops, it becomes clear that this isn't just about making fun of superhero movies. It's about exploring how people, especially children, use fantasy and role-playing to cope with feelings of powerlessness and insignificance in their real lives. Eric Cartman's adoption of the Coon persona reveals the character's psychology in unprecedented depth. The Coon isn't just a superhero costume for Cartman. It's a manifestation of his desperate need for attention, control, and validation. Through the Coon identity, Cartman can position himself as the hero of his own story while simultaneously indulging his worst impulses toward manipulation and control. The costume gives him permission to be even more authoritarian and self-aggrandizing than usual, all while claiming to serve the greater good. What makes Cartman's superhero persona particularly disturbing is how it reflects real-world dynamics of how people use ideology and institutional power to justify selfish behavior. The Coon represents every politician, activist, or authority figure who wraps personal ambition in the language of public service. Cartman genuinely believes he's the hero of the story, which makes him more dangerous than a simple villain would be. The revelation that Kenny is Mysterian adds layers of complexity to both characters while providing one of the series' most emotionally resonant storylines. Kenny's decision to become a superhero isn't motivated by a desire for attention or power. It's driven by his genuine desire to help people and his unique understanding of mortality through his repeated deaths and resurrections. Mysterian represents Kenny's attempt to find meaning and purpose in his suffering, to transform his curse into something that can benefit others. Kenny's superhero identity also provides a vehicle for exploring his complex relationship with poverty and social invisibility. As Mysterian, Kenny can finally be seen and heard in ways that his regular identity doesn't allow. The costume and alter ego give him a voice and a presence that his economic circumstances typically deny him. This creates a powerful commentary on how society renders certain people invisible and how those individuals might seek alternative forms of recognition and agency. The cosmic horror elements that emerge in the Cthulhu storyline transform the superhero narrative into something approaching genuine mythology. The revelation that Kenny's immortality is connected to ancient cosmic forces elevates his character from simple running gag to tragic figure caught between mortal and immortal existence. This storyline allows South Park to explore existential themes about the nature of consciousness, death, and cosmic significance while maintaining its irreverent tone. The other children's superhero personas serve as character studies that reveal aspects of their personalities that don't always emerge in regular episodes. Toolshed, Stan, the human kite Kyle, Super Craig, and the others each bring their own motivations and psychological needs to their superhero identities. These costumes become vehicles for exploring how children process adult concepts like justice, responsibility, and moral obligation. The franchise elements of the superhero storyline provide perfect opportunities for satirizing contemporary media culture and the commercialization of heroic narratives. The boys' obsession with building their superhero brand, creating merchandise, and managing their public image reflects how modern superhero media has become as much about marketing and corporate synergy as about storytelling. This allows South Park to comment on how genuine human desires for heroism and meaning get co-opted by commercial interests. The Captain Hindsight episodes extend the superhero universe while providing commentary on media culture and political discourse. Captain Hindsight's ability to perfectly explain what should have been done after disasters have already occurred satirizes the pundit culture that dominates news media. His character reveals how easy it is to appear wise and insightful when you're not actually responsible for making difficult decisions under pressure. The psychological appeal of superhero narratives, as explored through South Park's lens, reveals fundamental human needs for agency, purpose, and moral clarity in a complex and often unjust world. The children's adoption of superhero identities represents their attempt to create a framework where good and evil are clearly defined and where individual action can make a meaningful difference. But the storyline also explores the darker aspects of vigilante fantasy. The Coon's authoritarian tendencies and willingness to use violence to achieve his goals reflect how superhero narratives can appeal to authoritarian impulses and justify extra-legal violence. This creates a complex examination of the genre that acknowledges both its inspirational potential and its dangerous implications. The environmental and social justice themes that emerge in some of the superhero episodes allow the show to explore how genuine activist impulses can coexist with personal psychological needs. Some of the children are genuinely motivated by desire to help others and improve their community, while others are primarily seeking personal validation and power. This reflects real-world dynamics in activist and political movements where mixed motives and competing agendas can complicate efforts toward positive change. The ongoing nature of the superhero universe, with characters occasionally appearing in superhero costumes in later episodes, suggests that these identities represent something deeper than temporary fantasy. They become part of how these characters understand themselves and their relationships with each other. This creates a unique form of character development where alternate identities reveal aspects of personality that might otherwise remain hidden. The technical execution of the superhero episodes, with their more elaborate animation and action sequences, demonstrates South Park's willingness to experiment with different storytelling approaches when a narrative demands it. The visual style becomes more dynamic and cinematic during superhero sequences, creating a contrast with the show's typically static animation that enhances the fantasy elements while maintaining the essential South Park aesthetic. Perhaps most importantly, The Coon and Friends universe represents South Park's most sustained exploration of how narrative and identity intersect. The superhero costumes allow the characters to try on different versions of themselves, to explore aspects of their personalities and moral beliefs that don't fit within their normal social roles. In doing so, they reveal fundamental truths about human nature and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we want to become. When South Park premiered in 1997, the internet was still a novelty for most Americans. Social media didn't exist, and smartphones were the stuff of science fiction. Yet over the past 25-plus years, the show has consistently demonstrated an almost prophetic understanding of how digital technology would reshape human relationships, social discourse, and individual psychology. From early episodes about internet addiction to recent storylines about social media manipulation, South Park has served as both chronicler and predictor of our digital evolution. The show's first major exploration of internet culture came with Overlogging, which depicted a world where internet access had become so essential to daily life that its temporary loss created widespread social collapse. What seemed like absurd exaggeration at the time now feels remarkably prescient, as internet connectivity has indeed become critical infrastructure that affects everything from economic activity to personal relationships to basic social functioning. Randy Marsh's internet addiction in that episode, particularly his compulsive consumption of online pornography, anticipated broader patterns of how digital technology would affect human behavior and relationships. His inability to function without constant internet access, his preference for online stimulation over real-world interaction, and his general deterioration of impulse control all became common patterns as internet access became ubiquitous. Make Love, Not Warcraft represents perhaps South Park's most sophisticated early examination of how online gaming and virtual worlds could replace real-world social interaction and achievement. The episode's portrayal of players becoming so absorbed in virtual achievements that they neglect their physical health and real-world relationships anticipated the rise of gaming addiction and the broader phenomenon of people finding more satisfaction in digital accomplishments than in offline activities. The episode also explored how virtual spaces could provide forms of agency and identity that weren't available in the real world. For the boys, success in World of Warcraft offered a form of power and recognition that their real lives couldn't provide. This dynamic has only intensified as virtual worlds have become more sophisticated and as real-world opportunities for meaningful achievement have become more limited for many people. The show's treatment of social media and digital communication has been particularly prescient in its exploration of how these technologies affect human psychology and social dynamics. Episodes dealing with Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms revealed how social media could amplify existing human tendencies toward narcissism, tribalism, and attention-seeking while creating new forms of social pressure and anxiety. Gerald Broflovsky's transformation into the internet troll, Skankhunt42, provided one of the most psychologically complex examinations of online behavior in any media. The storyline explored how the anonymity and distance provided by internet communication could allow people to express aspects of their personality that they would never reveal in face-to-face interaction. Gerald's trolling wasn't simply random cruelty. It was a way for him to feel powerful and important in a world where he felt increasingly irrelevant. The international implications of Gerald's trolling, which eventually led to a crisis in U.S.-Denmark relations, anticipated how local online behavior could have global consequences in an interconnected world. The episode revealed how individual actions in digital spaces could escalate into real-world conflicts with serious political and economic implications. The show's exploration of smartphone addiction and constant connectivity has captured the psychological and social costs of always being online culture. Episodes showing characters unable to function without constant digital stimulation, preferring virtual interaction to face-to-face communication, and experiencing anxiety when disconnected from their devices all accurately predicted patterns that have become endemic in contemporary society. The digital validation themes that run through many technology-focused episodes reveal how social media and online platforms have created new forms of psychological dependency. Characters seek likes, shares, and comments as forms of validation, measuring their self-worth through digital metrics rather than real-world relationships and achievements. This anticipation of social media psychology has proven remarkably accurate as researchers have documented the mental health impacts of constant social comparison and validation seeking online. South Park's treatment of online harassment and cyberbullying revealed the dark side of digital communication before these issues became mainstream concerns. The show demonstrated how the anonymity and distance provided by digital communication could enable forms of cruelty and harassment that would be impossible in face-to-face interaction, while also exploring how victims of online harassment often felt helpless to respond or escape. The exploration of digital echo chambers and information bubbles anticipated how social media algorithms and self-selecting online communities could contribute to political polarization and social fragmentation. Episodes showing characters retreating into online spaces where their existing beliefs were constantly reinforced revealed how digital technology could actually reduce rather than increase exposure to diverse perspectives and ideas. The show's examination of technology's impact on childhood development has been particularly insightful, showing how constant digital stimulation affects attention spans, social skills, and emotional regulation. Episodes depicting children unable to engage in sustained offline activities, preferring virtual interaction to real-world play, and experiencing emotional dysregulation when separated from their devices all anticipated patterns that child development experts are now documenting as serious concerns. The economic implications of digital technology have also been explored through various storylines, examining how online platforms and digital intermediaries extract value from user data and attention. The show revealed how free digital services actually monetize user information and behavior, anticipating contemporary debates about data privacy and digital surveillance capitalism. The international and political dimensions of digital technology have been addressed through storylines about internet censorship, government surveillance, and the global flow of digital information. These episodes anticipated how digital technology would become a battleground for competing political and economic interests, with authoritarian governments seeking to control information flows while democratic societies struggled to balance freedom with security. Perhaps most prophetically, South Park has explored how digital technology interacts with existing social and economic inequalities. Episodes showing how digital divides could exacerbate existing forms of exclusion and disadvantage anticipated how unequal access to technology and digital literacy will become new sources of social stratification. The show's treatment of artificial intelligence and automated systems has revealed early awareness of how these technologies could affect employment, decision-making, and human autonomy. While AI storylines have been less prominent than social media themes, they've consistently shown skepticism about claims that technological solutions can solve complex human problems without creating new forms of dysfunction. The psychological themes that run through South Park's technology commentary reveal deep insights into how digital tools interact with fundamental human needs and vulnerabilities. The show has consistently shown that technology amplifies existing human tendencies rather than fundamentally changing human nature, which explains why digital solutions often recreate offline problems in new forms rather than solving them. Throughout its remarkable run, South Park has maintained a unique position in American political discourse, that of the outsider looking in, willing to mock anyone and everyone while refusing to align itself with any particular political tribe or ideology. This fearless approach to political satire has made the show both beloved and reviled across the political spectrum, often simultaneously, as Stone and Parker have consistently demonstrated their commitment to equal opportunity offense and their skepticism of all forms of political orthodoxy. The show's political evolution reflects broader changes in American political culture over the past quarter century. In the early seasons, political episodes often focused on relatively straightforward partisan politics and culture war issues. But as American politics became more polarized and extreme, South Park's political commentary became more sophisticated, exploring not just what politicians do, but how political processes themselves shape and distort human behavior. The series' approach to presidential politics demonstrates this evolution perfectly. Early depictions of political figures were often simple caricatures focused on obvious personality flaws or scandals. Bill Clinton was portrayed as a sex-obsessed politician, George W. Bush as an incompetent buffoon, and these characterizations, while harsh, operated within familiar satirical frameworks that audiences could easily understand. But the show's treatment of Barack Obama marked a shift toward more complex political commentary. Rather than simply mocking Obama's policies or personality, South Park examined the phenomenon of Obama as cultural symbol and the way his presidency became a screen onto which people projected their own hopes, fears, and fantasies about American society. Episodes like Obama Wins explored how political campaigns had become forms of entertainment that distracted from actual governance. The Trump era presented South Park with perhaps its greatest satirical challenge. How do you satirize someone who already seems like a cartoon character? The show's solution was to largely avoid direct Trump impersonation, instead using Mr. Garrison as a Trump stand-in while focusing on how Trump's presidency revealed deeper pathologies in American political culture. This approach allowed the show to examine Trumpism as a social phenomenon rather than just mocking Trump as an individual. The PC Principle storyline represents South Park's most sustained examination of how progressive politics can become authoritarian when taken to extremes. PC Principle embodies the contradiction between progressive ideals and authoritarian methods. He genuinely wants to create a more inclusive environment, but his approach involves intimidation, surveillance, and punishment for people who don't demonstrate sufficient ideological conformity. This storyline revealed South Park's libertarian skepticism about both traditional conservative authority and progressive activism. The show consistently advocates for individual dignity and personal freedom while remaining suspicious of organized movements that claim to speak for marginalized groups, regardless of their political orientation. The show's treatment of social movements and activism demonstrates this balanced skepticism. Whether dealing with environmental activism, civil rights movements, or conservative religious campaigns, South Park typically portrays the underlying concerns as legitimate while critiquing the methods, leadership, and unintended consequences of organized political action. The election episodes throughout the series have captured the evolving dysfunction of American democratic processes. From the early douche and turd episode, which introduced the concept that elections often involve choosing between two unpalatable options, to more recent episodes dealing with electoral manipulation and misinformation, the show has consistently portrayed American democracy as a system that serves elite interests rather than ordinary citizens. The international political episodes reveal South Park's understanding of America's complex relationship with the rest of the world. Whether dealing with Canadian politics, Middle Eastern conflicts, or European social policies, the show typically portrays American foreign policy as a mixture of good intentions and cultural imperialism that often creates more problems than it solves. The show's handling of political correctness and free speech issues has been particularly influential, establishing South Park as a champion of unrestricted satirical expression while also examining the social costs of completely unregulated speech. The Muhammad cartoon controversy epitomized this tension, as the show defended the principle of free expression while acknowledging the real-world consequences that can result from provocative satirical content. The economic dimensions of political power have been consistently explored through storylines about corporate influence, wealth inequality, and a relationship between economic and political elites. Episodes dealing with big business, government regulation, and economic policy typically show how both market failures and government interventions can serve powerful interests at the expense of ordinary people. The media criticism that runs through many political episodes reveals South Park's understanding of how news coverage and political commentary shape public opinion and political behavior. The show has consistently portrayed mainstream media as more interested in generating controversy and entertainment than in providing useful information for democratic decision-making. The local politics episodes, focusing on South Park's town meetings and municipal government, provides some of the show's most effective political satire by revealing how democratic dysfunction plays out at the most basic level. These episodes show how even small-scale political decisions can become dominated by special interests, personal vendettas, and ideological extremism. The show's treatment of political activism and grassroots movements reveals its skepticism about whether organized political action can actually produce meaningful change. While individual characters often demonstrate genuine moral growth and positive change, collective political action is typically portrayed as ineffective at best and counterproductive at worst. Perhaps most importantly, South Park's political commentary has consistently focused on the psychological and cultural dimensions of political behavior rather than policy details or partisan talking points. The show is more interested in exploring why people become attracted to political extremism, how political identities affect personal relationships, and how political processes bring out the worst in human nature. The show's refusal to provide easy answers or clear moral guidance in political episodes reflects its fundamental skepticism about political solutions to human problems. Rather than advocating for specific policies or candidates, South Park typically suggests that political systems are inherently corrupting and that genuine human progress comes from individual moral development rather than institutional change. This approach has allowed South Park to maintain its satirical relevance across multiple political eras and cultural shifts. By focusing on the universal human elements of political behavior rather than temporary partisan issues, the show has created political commentary that remains relevant even as specific political circumstances change. The lasting impact of South Park's political satire extends beyond entertainment to influence how people think about political participation and civic engagement. The show's consistent message that all political movements and leaders are flawed has contributed to a more skeptical and critical approach to political authority, though whether this skepticism ultimately serves democratic values remains an open question. As South Park approaches its third decade on television, its cultural impact extends far beyond entertainment into the realms of language, social discourse, and collective memory. The show has fundamentally altered how animated comedy functions as a medium, created new possibilities for satirical expression, and established precedents for fearless cultural commentary that continue to influence creators across all forms of media. The linguistic impact of South Park cannot be overstated. Phrases like, "Oh my God," "They killed Kenny," and "Respect my authority" have entered the global lexicon, transcending their original context to become shorthand for specific types of situations and behaviors. The show's influence on internet culture has been particularly profound, with memes, references, and catchphrases from the series continuing to circulate and evolve in online spaces years or even decades after their original broadcast. But the show's cultural impact goes beyond memorable quotes to encompass fundamental changes in how satirical comedy operates in contemporary media. Before South Park, animated series were generally expected to be either children's programming or family-friendly entertainment. South Park proved that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult commentary on controversial topics, paving the way for shows like Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman, and countless others that use animation to explore complex themes. The production model pioneered by South Park, rapid turnaround times that allow for commentary on current events, has influenced not just other animated series, but comedy programming more broadly. The 6-day production cycle that allows South Park to comment on events that happened the previous week has become a benchmark for topical relevance that other shows strive to match, even when their production schedules don't allow for the same immediacy. The show's approach to controversy and censorship has established important precedents for artistic freedom in television. By consistently pushing boundaries and fighting censorship battles, South Park has helped expand the range of topics and approaches that are considered acceptable for television comedy. Many topics that seem routine in contemporary media were first broached or normalized through South Park's willingness to tackle taboo subjects. The international impact of South Park reveals how American satirical content can influence global cultural conversations. The show has been translated into dozens of languages and has sparked controversies and discussions in countries around the world. Episodes dealing with international topics have sometimes become news stories themselves, demonstrating how entertainment content can become a form of unofficial diplomacy. Academic interest in South Park has grown significantly over the years, with scholars analyzing the show from perspectives ranging from media studies to philosophy to political science. The existence of academic conferences, peer-reviewed articles, and university courses devoted to South Park demonstrates how the show has achieved a level of cultural significance that extends beyond popular entertainment into serious intellectual discourse. The show's influence on comedy writing and satirical approaches can be seen throughout contemporary media. The South Park model of taking extreme positions to expose the absurdity of more moderate stances has become a standard comedic technique. The show's willingness to change positions or contradict itself for comedic effect has also influenced how other satirical content approaches consistency and ideological purity. The merchandising and commercial success of South Park has demonstrated the economic viability of controversial content, encouraging networks and studios to take risks on edgier programming. The success of South Park merchandise, video games, and other commercial tie-ins has shown that audiences will support controversial content with their wallets, not just their attention. The show's approach to celebrity culture and public figures has influenced how other comedic content deals with fame and power. South Park's willingness to mock anyone, regardless of their status or influence, has established a precedent for satirical fearlessness that other shows have attempted to emulate, though few have matched South Park's consistency in this regard. The technological innovations that emerged from South Park's production needs have influenced animation and television production more broadly. The digital animation techniques developed to maintain the show's rapid production schedule have been adopted by other productions, and the show's early embrace of digital distribution and online content has influenced how television content reaches audiences. The show's treatment of social issues has often been ahead of mainstream discourse, introducing audiences to concepts and perspectives that later became more widely discussed. Whether dealing with gender identity, economic inequality, or political polarization, South Park has frequently served as an early indicator of cultural shifts that would later become major social movements. The educational impact of South Park, while controversial, has been significant. Despite its crude humor and offensive content, the show has introduced many viewers to complex philosophical, political, and social concepts that they might not have encountered otherwise. The show's ability to make abstract ideas concrete and accessible through humor has made it an unofficial educational resource for many viewers. The show's influence on internet culture and meme creation has been particularly profound. South Park episodes and characters have provided source material for countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. The show's rapid response to internet trends and online culture has created a feedback loop where South Park influences internet culture while simultaneously being influenced by it. The preservation of South Park episodes as historical documents has created an unusual archive of American cultural attitudes and concerns over the past quarter century. Future historians and sociologists will likely study South Park episodes to understand what Americans were thinking and talking about during specific periods, making the show an inadvertent form of cultural anthropology. Perhaps most significantly, South Park has demonstrated that satirical comedy can maintain cultural relevance and influence across multiple decades and cultural shifts. In an era when most entertainment content has increasingly short shelf lives, South Park's continued relevance suggests that fearless satirical commentary addressing universal human themes can transcend temporary cultural moments to achieve lasting significance. The show's legacy continues to evolve as new generations discover it, and as contemporary events provide new context for understanding older episodes. What seemed like simple shock humor in 1997 can now be viewed as prescient social commentary. while recent episodes continue to generate the same controversies and discussions that have characterized the show throughout its run. As we reach the end of our journey through South Park's vast and complex universe, it's worth reflecting on where this remarkable show stands today and what mysteries still remain unsolved after more than 25 years of storytelling. South Park exists in a unique position in contemporary media, simultaneously a relic of late 90s comedy and a cutting-edge commentary machine that continues to surprise, offend, and enlighten audiences with each new episode. The show's future has been secured through unprecedented deals with Paramount Plus and Comedy Central that guarantee new content through 2027, including both traditional episodes and streaming specials that allow for even more experimental storytelling approaches. These new formats have given Stone and Parker opportunities to explore longer narrative arcs and more complex themes while maintaining the rapid response satirical approach that has always defined the series. The recent streaming specials have demonstrated South Park's continued relevance and adaptability. Episodes dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, cryptocurrency, and other contemporary issues have shown that the show's satirical framework remains as effective as ever for processing and understanding rapidly changing cultural phenomena. The fact that South Park can still generate genuine controversy and cultural discussion after more than 2 decades speaks to its continued vitality and importance. But several significant storylines and character arcs remain unresolved, creating tantalizing possibilities for future development. Kenny's immortality curse and his connection to cosmic horror entities represents perhaps the most significant ongoing mystery in the South Park universe. While the Cthulhu trilogy provided some explanations, the full implications of Kenny's supernatural status remain unexplored. How does his immortality actually work? What are the long-term consequences of his repeated deaths and resurrections? Are there other cosmic forces that might take interest in his unique condition? The relationship dynamics between the main characters continue to evolve in ways that suggest deeper developments ahead. Stan's recurring depression and cynicism, Kyle's moral struggles in an increasingly complex world, Cartman's potential for both ultimate evil and unexpected growth, and Kenny's burden of supernatural knowledge all point toward character arcs that could provide material for years of additional storytelling. The adults of South Park present their own unresolved storylines. Randy Marsh's transformation from background character to cultural phenomenon reflects broader changes in American masculinity and middle-age psychology that continue to evolve. His various business ventures, social media obsessions, and attempts to remain relevant in a changing world mirror real-world cultural trends that show no signs of stabilizing. The supernatural elements that have always lurked beneath South Park's surface suggest possibilities for even more ambitious storytelling. The town's apparent status as a nexus for paranormal activity, the various cosmic horror entities that have appeared throughout the series, and the unexplained phenomena that regularly occur all point toward a deeper mythology that could support major narrative developments. The show's approach to contemporary issues continues to evolve as new challenges emerge. Climate change, artificial intelligence, social media manipulation, economic inequality, and political polarization all present ongoing opportunities for the kind of satirical examination that South Park does best. The show's ability to find humor in even the darkest contemporary developments suggests that it will remain relevant as long as human civilization continues to generate absurdity and dysfunction. International storylines present another area for potential development. South Park's unique position as American entertainment with global reach creates opportunities for examining international conflicts, cultural differences, and global political dynamics in ways that other shows can't match. The show's previous international episodes have demonstrated Stone and Parker's willingness to take risks with geopolitically sensitive material. The educational and academic interest in South Park continues to grow, suggesting that the show's cultural impact extends far beyond entertainment into serious intellectual discourse. University courses analyzing South Park's satirical techniques, political commentary, and cultural influence have become increasingly common, indicating that the show has achieved a level of cultural significance that ensures its lasting relevance. The technological changes that continue to reshape media consumption and cultural discourse present both challenges and opportunities for South Park's future development. The show's rapid production schedule and topical relevance give it advantages in an era of accelerated news cycles and social media-driven cultural conversations. But the fragmentation of media audiences and the polarization of political discourse also create new obstacles for satirical content that aims to reach broad audiences. The generational changes in both the show's creative team and its audience suggest that South Park may need to continue evolving its approaches to remain relevant to new viewers while satisfying longtime fans. The challenge of maintaining satirical edge while avoiding the kind of reflexive cynicism that can alienate younger audiences represents an ongoing creative challenge. The economic realities of contemporary television production and distribution continue to shape how South Park can develop and reach audiences. The success of streaming specials and digital distribution has opened new possibilities for experimental content, but the changing economics of entertainment also create pressures towards safer, more commercially viable content that could potentially constrain the show's satirical ambitions. Perhaps most intriguingly, the question of how South Park will eventually end remains completely open. Stone and Parker have shown no signs of running out of material or losing their satirical edge. But the eventual conclusion of such a long-running and culturally significant series will present unique challenges. How do you end a show that has been documenting and commenting on American culture for decades? What kind of resolution could possibly satisfy audiences who have followed these characters and storylines for so long? The metafictional aspects of South Park commentary on its own existence and cultural roles suggest that the show's creators are aware of these challenges and may be planning approaches that acknowledge the show's unique position in cultural history. The occasional episodes that directly address South Park's own controversies and cultural impact indicate that Stone and Parker are thinking about their creation's legacy and long-term significance. Ultimately, South Park's future seems likely to continue reflecting its past, fearless, unpredictable, willing to offend anyone and everyone while maintaining its essential humanity and moral core. The show has survived and thrived through multiple cultural shifts, political upheavals, and generational changes by remaining true to its fundamental commitment to satirical honesty and emotional authenticity. As long as human beings continue to be hypocritical, self-deluded, and ridiculous, which seems like a safe bet, South Park will have material to work with. The real question isn't whether the show will remain relevant, but whether audiences will continue to have the stomach for the kind of unflinching self-examination that South Park demands. In a world that increasingly prefers comfortable confirmation of existing beliefs over challenging satirical commentary, South Park's continued existence represents a small but significant victory for intellectual honesty and creative courage. The mysteries may never be fully solved, the character arcs may never reach perfect resolution, and the cultural commentary may never provide easy answers. But that's exactly what makes South Park so valuable. It's a show that embraces complexity, uncertainty, and moral ambiguity while never losing its sense of humor about the absurdity of human existence. And really, what more could you ask for from a crude cartoon about four foul-mouthed kids?